Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so very much for joining us today. My name is Chris. I am the creative lead here at Mobile Live, and I will also be your presenter today, or moderator today for How to Future-Proof Your Small or Medium-Sized Business webinar. Now, we've got a lot of really good information to share with you today, but before my colleague gets into that, I'd like to discuss with you why we specifically chose this topic. And I think the answer might surprise you. Now, recent events, as we all know, have affected the way that we work and the way that we live our lives on a global scale. And it was those who were not prepared for such an event that were impacted the most. However, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Very few people were actually prepared. By that, I mean the ability that so many of these companies had to continue working during the pandemic, to keep communicating with their teams, to keep collaborating, and ultimately to keep serving their customers wasn't a plan that they put in place as a response to the pandemic. It was a capability that they were all actively working towards that just so happened to have the byproduct of business continuity. Today, my colleague is going to share with you how those organizations did it and how you can do it for yourself. Plus, there will be a Q&A session at the end where we'll have the opportunity to answer any and all of your questions. And I'd encourage you to please use the chat or the Q&A function at the bottom bar as your questions come up, just so you don't forget. And on that note, I'm going to pass it over to my friend and colleague, your presenter today, Ali Asker. Ali?
Thank you, Chris, and welcome all of you to the webinar. Thanks for taking time to attend it. As Chris pointed out to you, that I'll be speaking to you about future proofing businesses with cloud computing. In that context, I'll be speaking to you about business continuity and remote for workforce enablement. The joke, business joke that you see on the screen, I'm sure that you have seen it before. The reason I've put it up there is because it makes a really powerful statement about how COVID-19 has impacted digital transformation and what COVID-19 has been able to do to sort of draw attention uh, to leveraging the need for leveraging need for leveraging technology to enable business continuity. The paradigm shift that is sort of ushered in by COVID-19 literally overnight. I mean, if you imagine it, it's really beyond a transforming power of even the best CEO that's out there. But all the jokes aside, I mean, the event that we are living through right now has changed the way we work, the way we live our lives. All has changed. I mean, maybe likely forever. And as the data is trickling down and we begin to see that, that's completely astounding. I mean, if you look at how the remote work has skyrocketed, uh, for the past many years. I mean, 10% has been consistently what Canadian employees have been working from home, and that has increased to 40%. That means 1.8 million Canadians going up to 7 million Canadians working from home. In addition, 3 million were just not able to work. 2 million Canadians worked 50% or less. I mean, what we see here is that what's remarkable about this data, especially the remote work data, is that this 10% data that you see up there on the screen, this has literally remained static over a decade, and suddenly in 3 weeks it quadrupled. As people start working remotely and workers realized and experienced that new paradigm, we begin to see that they started to prefer this mode of work with this flexibility that came along with it. And what we see is 9 out of 10 workers indicate that they would prefer to work from home, even beyond COVID-19. Similarly, businesses also realize that this trend is here to stay. And we see that 57% of the SMBs indicated that they believe that work from home is here to stay. Now, essentially, what has happened is that Genie is out. The what prevented businesses to allow remote work is out. It's flexible. It's potentially cost effective, and is as good or even better than working from offices. What that that reluctance that management had to wrap their head around on how to manage the distributed workforce is no longer there. It's sort of evaporated because of COVID-19. um, and the technology hurdle that especially small businesses and medium-sized businesses felt is sort of not there, simply because you are now sort of backed against the wall, organizations and businesses, that they have to adopt technology. So that's not there. um, but as we move along, we see that this seismic change that has occurred because of the pandemic, uh, all of us got impacted. I mean, every type of business was impacted. Uh, SMBs were impacted even more. I mean, they are the most vulnerable sector of the economy. Um, Among the mounting challenges that they face, uh, one of them was access to on-premise IT. Many of them have IT infrastructure that are sitting in their offices, um, which accessing to the office was shut down, and that sort of caused major issues. Their tools to communicate and collaborate between their staff, um, uh, they faced hurdle in that a particular domain. The security setup that could enable them to work remotely and in a distributed way wasn't there. The old legacy application that came in a way of remote work also hindered their business operations. Inability to serve and contact their customer was another issue that they faced. So as pandemic progressed and we begin to see more data, what we saw that 1 in 3 office workers, I mean Canadian office worker, felt that they were less productive. 37% saw that technology was the barrier, and this turns out to be the biggest barrier that we see due to the to running business due to the pandemic. Um, there was another thing that we found in surveys and data. We see that 1 in 2 office workers also indicated that if the technology was improved, their productivity is going to improve. Communications, collaborations, workflow tools cited as most critical for productivity. Um, while everyone was affected, we saw that not everyone was affected in the same manner. In fact, there are organizations, there are companies uh, had we were not affected. I mean, the picture was completely different for them. There was little to no disruption in service for them. Access to information, data, and application was available to their staff and employees to continue business operations safely and securely. They had tools available so they could collaborate, communicate, and share data, documentation with one another, so that they can act like a team even if they were not present in person. So the staff kept working and customer kept getting served. Essentially, they were future proof. They were as if ready for COVID-19. So I guess when we look at it, we realize what exactly is I mean, what they did differently. What was their secret? Well, their secret was that they were cloud enabled. They had all the information on the cloud. So they did not see any constraint in working away from their offices. So let's talk about what is cloud computing exactly. I mean, if you look at Wikipedia, it says cloud computing is on demand availability of computer system resources like data storage, cloud storage, and computing power without direct active management by the user. What this means is really that IT infrastructure like servers, databases, um, other services that you would typically need is available to you on a as a rental. So you could rent those resources or lease them as and when you want to use them and then return them. So if you look at these large cloud provider, large platforms like AWS, they are globally present. So they have IT infrastructure regionalized around the world where IT infrastructure is present. So you could access it from anywhere. I mean, if you look at just Amazon, they have over 2 dozen regions in the world where they have large amount of IT infrastructure present, connected through very high speed networks. And if you look at their just number of servers around the world are in millions. So these are massive. So essentially what it means is that you could imagine that you have your data center, your IT infrastructure uh, available or is present globally, which you can tap into whenever you want to use them. Essentially, except that neither you manage these resources nor you have to put up capital expense in order to put them up. You just simply rent them whenever you need to use them, and that's essentially it. So let's talk about a couple of use cases, the real life examples of companies cloud enabled and not cloud enabled. Um, so we understand that how companies that were on cloud were impacted compared to the companies that were not. Let's take the first example of a company which is a small transportation and logistics company. Um, this company had on-premise IT infrastructure. They had servers, desktops, databases, custom applications. But their scenario is that their staff comes into office. They have their own desktops where they essentially connect to applications, which is running on their server, sitting right in their office, and they function that way. Um, so when the lockdown occurred and there was no on-premise access, essentially their business was shut down for several days. Because the staff could not access the offices, they simply could not function. The business was essentially completely shut down for a few days, and uh, then they managed to find a remote desktop software where they could get into their desktop from outside and do business operations, except that that management itself wasn't that simple to do because everything is still in their offices. So to connect to their customer and communicate with them and serve them became a real challenge for them, and their business suffered. And now let's look at another example. This is an example from professional services company, which is cloud enabled. They have all applications and data accessible on cloud via internet. So when the lockdown occurred, their staff could not go to offices, obviously, but they were not impacted because they could access all their applications that was required for them to essentially function existed. They had tools to collaborate and communicate with one another. They could share their documentation. They could work on documentation simultaneously, and they could really function the way uh, uh, they needed to in order to run the business operations. They had automatic workflow for operational continuity. Essentially, for them, the first day of the lockdown was commuting to their living rooms or their kitchens or uh, wherever in their homes that they chose to work from, and the business continued. The reality is that the world of business has been adopting cloud for a while, including SMBs. Um, the only thing that the pandemic has done is that it has accelerated this trend. What pandemic has able to make businesses realize that cloud computing is really the way to ensure that the service is uninterrupted and continuous. But all of these companies have gone into cloud before even pandemic hit. So wasn't just the business continuity. It was business continuity just a start to get into cloud. There are many other drivers of getting into cloud, and I would like to talk about each one of them briefly to really understand that why is cloud such an important uh, new way of connecting and doing things. The first is collaborative environment. So even if you are you are working in a distributed environment where your staff and your workers are remote, they are they can function collaborative. There are tools available to communicate, collaborate, and act as if you are in person together. The second one, which is a really a primary business continuity scenario, is remote work. So that means your staff can work from anywhere they want to. The only thing required is an internet connection. So that is enabled by cloud. Now, reliability and availability. This is really important. The reason I was just speaking to you about this, how massive and large these networks are, they are really built to withstand failures, and their service reliabilities are typically very high, much higher than what a small or a medium-sized businesses having their own infrastructure can really make it happen, right? It's almost infeasible for them to create a reliability like this. Then scaling up and down on demand. I mean, IT. It's known that IT infrastructure is there is a lot more capacity in IT infrastructure that is out there, simply because when you put your own IT infrastructure, you have to design it based upon the peak demand. What cloud does is that you can scale up and down. I mean, almost in minutes, literally, and that allows you to not have this infrastructure that is designed for peak. Security is one of the interesting thing, because even today, if you go and look and ask, it appears as one of the biggest hurdle in getting to the cloud. But as people have began to, and businesses are adopting cloud, we begin to realize that the security that cloud uh, provides is a lot better than the security you could really create for your own self. I mean, the security boost that you get it from cloud is really amazing, and this particular hurdle, which is perceived as hurdle, is really not a hurdle; is an advantage. Going and one of the things that I like to mention here is that uh, the 60% of the SMBs buckle within 66 months after the cyber attack. So security is an important consideration um, uh, uh, from technology perspective. Pay as you go. So flexibility, a no contract type environment where you are never tied up is an important thing, and cloud provides that kind of flexibility. Mobility, as when I spoke about the remote work, mobility really comes with that. As long as you have an internet connection, you have an access. IT management. So that quite a bit changes, right? Because as soon as you adopt cloud, the entire life cycle that you have to manage for from the perspective of IT infrastructure, that's no longer there. So that part goes away. Now, so what is left is essentially managing your application and your services that are being offered on cloud. Um, Even there, a part of it is really managed by cloud operators. So that leaves you to something the most important, where you can use your IT not just only to sort of manage your infrastructure and your application and stuff, but you can, if you are strategic, you can really turn your IT into an enabler for you. And we'll talk a lot more about that. Lowers TCO and OPEX. I mean, as we said, that you don't have an infrastructure, so your CapEx really converts into OPEX. Overall, the total cost of ownership, as we see the data, is much lower, typically about 40%. The latest data that I've seen from published by Amazon goes as high up as 58% uh, 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 cost advantage. The last part is future proofing. I mean, there are, the first aspect of future proofing is really that you protect yourself from disasters like COVID-19 with remote workforce and collaborative environments. Um, uh, so your staff can function. But there is other aspect of it, aspect of future proofing, which is riding really a technology wave. It's important to use technology as an enabler, as leverage technology to grow and innovate, as we are really in the age of technology now. So we'll talk more about that as well, and a lot more that you can get from cloud. Um, so we talked a lot about the cloud computing and the platform itself. What I like to talk about is the journey itself. Um, when we speak to small and medium-sized companies in particularly, what we see is that cloud platforms appears to them as a complicated, intractable maze. And rightfully so, because these are really massive. These are massive, not in just terms of their infrastructure size, but also in terms of the services they offer. I mean, the hundreds of full-featured services are offered, and you can do anything you imagine to do there. So it helps to simplify the entire journey. I mean, this journey has a start, has an end, but you may enter into this journey anywhere, essentially, depending on what maturity level you may have. Um, and this is really what we are going to talk about is from the perspective of business continuity and future proofing your business. So let's look at that. The first step is really enabling remote work. When you enable your remote work, essentially what you have done is you have made your business independent of space. You are no longer reliant on brick and mortar uh, uh, as much. So because your workforce now can work from anywhere. The second step in that is enabling workforce communication. Now that they are distributed and they are everywhere, you need to have a mechanism to for them to communicate and collaborate as if they were in person. So that's the second step. The third step is once that you are set up to work together and operate your business, is taking care of your customer, the most important. That's what we'll talk about. And the last one, agility and innovation, a long-term value. I mean, this is, in my view, the most important, the most exciting part of cloud adoption. While you come into cloud because you want to future-proof, disaster-proof yourself, you provide flexibility to your workforce and other benefits, but uh, agility and innovation is an ultimate goal you should have in the longer run, because that allows you to then really leverage technology to grow and innovate. It's really starts to impact your business in a way that you want the technology that is available to do. Let's go to the first step, enable remote work. So the main idea here is that we want the workforce to be able to work from anywhere. And in order to do that, the one of the major feature that I'll talk about is the VDI. I mean, VDI does exactly that. What VDI is, or virtual desktop infrastructure, is that it's uh, uh, your desktop environment that is sitting on the cloud. So your workforce can essentially take any device, just simply log into the cloud, open up their own environment, and there you go. The singular one experience from anywhere they access. So you can really think of your desktop you might have sitting in your offices, become digitized and put up on cloud. There are different advantages that comes with this VDI. Besides that, now you are remote and be able to access a similar environment from anywhere, is enabling of a model referred to as BYOD, or bring your own device. Typically, what we find is that individuals have preference in terms of the device they use, and employees are happier when they can use the device they like. Uh, I mean, so there is potential benefit of not having any hardware for them, but even so, what essentially it gives you is that they have now the choice from a wide variety of devices they can go and access from. They are not tied up to a type of device you might provide them. Obviously, from an operational perspective, there is a very significant advantage of VDI. You have no hardware, you have no real software configuration, you have an image sitting there on the cloud, you can turn on and off for one user. Now remember that they may be using it, this VDI from different devices, but the data is always on the cloud, and it's safe and secure. And in fact, it gives you a lot more control as an employer, or as a company, or as an organization, that data, because you always control data that's sitting on the cloud. Obviously, from an operational perspective, a new employee that comes in, you can simply turn on another image, which your new employee can just go and log into, and there you go, has a environment. So it's very fast from that perspective. Now let me just take you back to that logistics and transportation company that we were talking about. If they had VDI, the day the lockdown occurred, essentially what would have happened is that their workforce simply would have gone to their own laptops, or their desktops, or even their tablets at home, and connected to the cloud, open up their own environment, and start working on it. So that would have been a serious benefit for them. They would have never felt the 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 shutdown that occurred, and then the business suffered. They would never would have seen that. Uh, the document sharing and collaboration is another thing that we spoke about. This is important because typically people work together and they produce content together. So collaborative environments where document sharing can occur is important. What it really means is that, let's say your staff was creating a particular plan, a business plan, say. They could simultaneously work on the same document while being located in different places, which is really amazing. Security. So a cloud environments, typically these larger hyperscale cloud environment are have conformance to all the major security standards. I mean, HIPAA, for instance, in North America, HIPAA, GDPR, PCI, or in Canada, we have PIPEDA. All of those things they already have. And when you are on one of these large cloud platforms, these security feature comes with that. And the last one, obviously, flexibility and saving is on-demand computing, storage and memory, and power, the computer power that you get it is all on demand. Uh, so let's go to the next step. The next step is about enabling workforce. I mean, this workforce communication. So we have talked about that your workforce is now remote and they can really log in from anywhere. So the next would be that think of the scenarios that they have when they are functioning in office. I mean, they might meet in a meeting room. They might do whiteboarding. They might talk to each other on phone. They might do other means of communication. Think of it as a single utility that unifies all these channels of communication, and sort of bridges any not only that bridges gap that you might feel when you are distributed, but also gives you the singular tool to access all channels of communication. It could be voice and text, could be audio and video, global voice and text. I mean, integrated communication that could include chat, instant messaging, sharing screens, and sharing, videos, documents. All of those could be done through a single utility. Um, One of the examples I like to give you here is of a college in Maryland, Montgomery College. They have different campuses, and they were struggling with this thing. So they had these three different requirements. One requirement was essentially distributed workforce where teachers went and delivered courses, then the administrative staff that needed to connect to a singular sort of communication and collaboration tool, and their student body, which was fairly sophisticated. I mean, young students who would not really just to want telephony, but many different type of tools like chats and instant messages, all those new tools, and they were looking for it. And what they had was a PBX with older telephony, and they went into this unified communication tool on cloud, and they suddenly had this single tool that allowed their entire workforce as well as their student body to communicate in the way they wanted. The next comes in the second step is enhancing your security. So one of the ways you could do when your staff is distributed is through data encryption and privacy through VPN. I mean, VPN is nowadays people use it even at home. I mean, I have it at home. What essentially does is it it encrypts your data end to end from the end user down to up to cloud. And next is multi-factor authentication. I'm sure you have used multi-factor authentication. If you go on your online banking, you would be asked to give username, password, and then you would be sent a one-time code uh, on your smartphone, which allows you one-time access. And that way, independent channels are used to authenticate and enhance security. So that's available. Now let's go to the third step, taking care of your customers. From that perspective, virtual contact centers in the cloud can be leveraged. These are omni-channel experience with voice, text, chat, any means of communication that you typically would have with your customers would be integrated into a single tool. What the interesting part about this is that they are rapidly deployable. I mean, if you had a contact center that was on-premise contact center, in order to make a change, it's literally months. Um, uh, while cloud-based contact center are readily deployable, they can be scaled up and down at will. I'll talk quickly about a case of Capital One in US. They went and used Amazon Virtual Contact Center. They claim that within 72 hours they were able to deploy uh, the entire contact center. And these are, we are talking about the large banks serving millions of customers. Um, so the various tools that you have available is you have voice, text, and chat integration into a single tool. You can have voice that converts into text, text into voice conversion. You have AI based automation whereby your major use cases can be automated uh, and through a chatbot. In addition, you could have integration with your customer relationship management. You can use that data to get more insights. In addition to that, the AI tools that you get now with these contact centers is that while the call comes in or communication occurs from your customer, you can really analyze that in real time. You could even anticipate why the customer might be calling you. You could potentially assess the sentiment of the customer who is calling you. Obviously, then later on, uh, uh, you could do transcription through an AI tools. So lots of interesting things you could do, and you could really become very efficient having such contact center for your customers. The next is achieving agility and innovation. I spoke about it earlier. This is my favorite. I mean, access to broad range of technologies to innovate. This is real value. I mean, we are talking about technology and organizational barriers lifted. You have technologies that you can access that otherwise a small company or medium-sized business cannot really afford to put up for themselves. Artificial intelligence or machine learning, augmented reality, and they're put up in a manner that the sort of full service features that are available on cloud, where you don't really have to develop these technologies, right? You take it in the form which you can directly apply to your business use case, and that's a real advantage as you grow and innovate. Launch new products. Obviously, you can essentially do anything you want to on cloud. That's a real benefit, and that type of services that are available uh, on cloud to be able to do new things and experiment with it, and in a manner that's cost efficient, right? I mean, if you were to go out and do a proof of concept on some product uh, in a in a non-cloud environment, it's a substantial investment. But in a cloud environment, the investment is substantially reduced. I mean, you use the resources you want to. The DevOps pipelines could actually make this thing very quick for you to create those softwares very quickly and services and test them out. Finally, what I would say is that cloud adoption should be viewed as a long-term strategy designed to transform the operation of your business. Really, if you look at it now, the technology is business, business is technology. And really, for a business to grow, leveraging technology is become sort of important now. You can really ignore it. In your strategic plan, technology has to be a line item nowadays. I mean, I remember a few years back talking to a friend in Toronto Dominion Bank, where CEO must have made a statement saying that TD is a technology company. Well, it's a large bank. I mean, it's one of the largest banks in Canada. How come they are a technology company? But when you really think about it, they are nowadays the financial operations are heavily reliant on technology. I mean, without technology, you can't really function in financial industry. I mean, you can actually be disrupted by a few individuals who are coming up with a completely new paradigm or new tool that could put up resistance or competition. So I would again say that come to cloud because uh, it gives you disaster proofing, future proofing, but stay there because you can really enable your businesses using the technologies that are available to you, and how its rapidly changing technology can be very quickly utilized for that. Um, Last thing, is it worth it? I mean, I guess you probably would have realized that I would always answer yes. That is cloud adoption worth it? Yes, definitely worth it. Um, Nowadays, we get this question of how quickly can I adopt the cloud? And that I say in as little as 3 days. So it could be very quick as well. So what I would leave you with this, that cloud is no longer where we will be in the future, but it's where we need to be today. That's essentially it. Thanks for being there. I'll give it to you, Chris.
Oh, thank you very much, Ali, but you are far from off the hook so far.
Okay.
We have quite a few questions that have come in from the audience,
All
and
right.
I will see if I can stump you here, but in no particular order. We will start off with, let's see, what happens post-cloud adoption, and what services do I need, and how would I maintain them?
Um, Excellent question. I mean, when you have adopted cloud, I mean, I earlier said that cloud is these platforms are very large. They have many services, and there are people with expertise uh, exist in order to really support you. Now, there's something referred to as managed services that you can obtain, which allows you to manage your presence in the cloud. Now, what level of managed services do you need depends upon uh, you know what your IT presence is. I mean, you may have an IT department. uh, you may not have much IT presence, but if you had, depending on that, you will acquire that managed services. Very basic managed services that could allow you to just manage your cloud. Then another option could be that where the managed services team would actually provide you monitoring and optimization services. One of the things in cloud is that when people go and adopt cloud, the optimization of cloud is important, and the data shows that people uh, oversubscribe the resources by 30%, which is significant. The last and but probably the most important in my mind is a premium, what we typically refer to as a next generation managed services, whereby a team of managed services or cloud experts work with your teams essentially as in a collaborative way, where they not only manage, they provide monitoring optimization of your presence in the cloud, but help your teams to understand the technologies that are coming up to essentially grow and enable your business at the next level, essentially.
Amazing. Okay, up next we have, in terms of availability and reliability, what type of guarantees can I expect from the cloud?
Um, Typically what we see is that these reliability numbers and stuff that are given by the cloud operators are on a per service basis. A typical number is 99.9% availability of their services. In some cases, when you're talking about compute power, they could be 99.99%. If they are not able to meet it, then there is the SLAs available, which says that depending on what level they are able to meet, you get the service credit back from them of not meeting.
Okay, excellent. I think this seems like a very good follow-up. How does the cost of a cloud subscription compare with the overall spending on IT infrastructure,
Okay,
maintenance?
so I spoke about that. I'll talk about two things. One thing is the direct cost. And I said the total cost of ownership, the numbers that are available shows about 40% total cost of ownership, uh, 40% benefit in terms of total cost of ownership. The latest number that I've seen from that came from AWS shows 58% as well. So it could be very significant depending on your situation. Um, the other part that I like to talk about from that benefit perspective is the access to latest, greatest, and emerging technology, which is really you have to keep in your calculation as I said, the technology has become a necessary element of your strategic plan and your future growth and innovation and staying up power and competitive power.
Okay. Up next, we have, is cloud adoption as big of an undertaking as it seems, especially if you have little limited resources and technical know-how?
Um, for a smaller company, the adoption to cloud or going through this maze, like I said, that we hear from them is could be challenging if they try to do it by themselves. But then there are services available from a consulting perspective, from the perspective of actually migrating their cloud, on-premise infrastructure to cloud, which are readily available, and then they could help them steer them through this maze very quickly. So I see that should really not be a reason for them to not go to cloud, because there are serious advantages of going to cloud.
Okay. Yes, yeah, I recall. How can I ensure that my privacy and data is kept safe?
Okay, so cloud is generally, like I said, is very secure environment, and we are finding it out more and more data. I mean, the surveys that in SMB and stuff shows that they actually find it more secure. But let me tell you, I think as part of your cloud adoption plan and strategy, you should have a strategy of encrypting data. One of the things we talked about was VPN, which encrypts data in transit. But then the data that you keep it on cloud can be encrypted as well. So encryption not only protects you from somebody who's trying to access your data, but also protects you from the cloud provider themselves. I mean, once the data is encrypted there, they really don't have a way to access the data themselves.
Okay. Um, when can small and medium-sized businesses start to see the ROI and benefits of migrating to the cloud?
Uh, so this is really dependent on business to business. I say a typical ROI you will begin to see it within a year um, of going there. But again, as I said it, it's really a case to case based on individual cases.
Okay. How are cloud providers regulated?
How are cloud providers regulated? Okay, so one of the things I spoke about from the regulatory perspective, that I showed that these most of the cloud providers, especially the hyperscale one, right? I mean, talking about the Googles or the Microsoft or the Amazons, their presence is global. So they do acquire the regulatory compliance of uh, in every region that they are. I mean, I spoke to you about a few standards that they comply with. But in addition to that, only in North America, if you look at Amazon, they probably have 15 or so regulatory compliance. So they are compliant heavily. They have to be, because these are the one also providing at the government level services. So compliance for them is very important.
Okay, that's great. I think we've got time for maybe two more questions.
Yep.
As a smaller company on the SMB scale, do I really need to adopt the cloud? Is it critical going forward?
Um, Yes, I know that the SMBs always think about, they have to be focused on only their businesses because limited resources is one of the things that SMB are uh, chronically suffering. I mean, that's how it is with the small businesses. But the data shows that a large percentage of SMBs who have adopted cloud, they come back and say that that is profitable in the long run. And I think I tried to point out that why that might be the case. We also saw it from only from the perspective of disaster recovery or remote work environment that this is beneficial, but it's beneficial only or not only from that perspective, but also from the perspective of reducing the cost as having flexible cloud environment where you only pay as you need. So yes, it's definitely on in the long run very beneficial. And if you go and include into the calculation the long-term strategic thing for SMB, you certainly should be looking at getting into cloud.
Okay, perfect. And to round us off, I've got one more question for us. We've talked a lot, or you've talked a lot about migrating to the cloud today, but what happens when the cloud goes down?
That's very interesting because cloud can also go down. Um, just like you have your infrastructure at home, cloud also is just the scale of it is extremely large. They don't have one or two servers, they have hundreds of servers, not hundreds servers, sorry, hundreds of thousands of servers. We are talking about globally millions of them. So they are highly redundant. One of the things, if you are concerned about the scenarios where the availability might not be there because a particular regional access to a data center went down, then one of the things can be done is that you when you set up your cloud, you set up it multiple regions. So you let's say you are in Amazon, you don't set up yourself up for a single region, but you do it at more than one region. That's why when a given region goes down, you can actually go and sort of route your traffic to another region. And but if you are going to say that all of those regions are going to go down simultaneously, then we are looking at something majorly disastrous where you really not be worried about your business, rather something else. So I think you can mitigate that through being present in multiple regions.
So replying to that email would be the least of your concerns in that
Yeah,
scenario, would it?
absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, well, that actually is about time for us today. I just wanted to take this opportunity and thank everyone for joining us here today. Ali, I'm just going to ask you to skip over to the next slide.
Okay.
I really hope all of you found today useful and learned something new. Again, I just like to remind everyone that Mobile Live would like to make themselves available to all of you to answer any of your questions. And we encourage you to please follow the link on the screen to set up your own one-on-one where we could discuss some possible cloud solutions for you. Thank you again, and everyone please keep an eye on your inbox because we will be sending a recording of this webinar along with a copy of the presentation that Ali gave today. And again, keep an eye out on our socials for any upcoming events, and I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of the day. Thank you again, and take care.